clear as far as what was recorded in the Register of Deeds and the deed to Mr. Bradford. So this should have been addressed back when he purchased this property in 2006, but it wasn't. He is now has an opportunity to sell this property to a third party, and this was brought forward under the very short circumstances because he was trying to meet a deadline for his transaction to sell the property. In order for them to transfer this property with clean title, to actually sell it, he has requested the county to release its interest in the real property, the reversionary interest. By statute, the only way the county can legally do that is to do as you always do a surplus property, declare it surplus, which you really have already done, and then sell it subject to upset bid process. In order to make that process happen, Mr. Bradford has offered $500 for the reversionary interest, and the proposed advertisement, if you wish to do this, is set out in the motion on the second page of the memo I've given you. The only other wrinkle to this is because of the timing of the advertising of this and his desire to get this done as quickly as possible, the board would need to set a special meeting this month. The earliest you could finalize this transaction would be June the 27th. So if the board does determine to do this, you would need to not only authorize the advertisement and sale of it, but to set a special meeting no sooner than June 27th to resolve this. It's my understanding, and I've attached a copy of a letter that Mr. Bradford provided someone, because it's mailed to him from Holden Reeves, another lawyer in Fayetteville. They wanted to close this tomorrow, and he is wanting to get this matter resolved so that he can at least close it by the end of this month. That would be the reason for setting a special hearing. And I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions, Mr. Millfield? Keith?
I'm a little confused on the upset bid process. So if somebody puts, what is the bid?
His offer is $500, and someone would have to bid $550 to upset it. I mean, that's
But what is he bidding on?
the reversionary interest in this property. It is the reversionary interest, in other words, the buyer of, if someone bid on, I don't think anyone would make an offer on this. This is just the statutory process that we have to go through. This is unusual. We've never sold a reversionary interest, but this is what we have. But it's still an interest in real estate. That's the reason they're asking for the county to relinquish it. If it wasn't a real interest, then we wouldn't be here.
Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wait, first of all, before I go to the question, I want to ask you, I just heard you say, did you just say that somebody would, you don't know about what somebody be making, if anybody be making any money off of this, or be making anything off of this,
No.
or what was that statement?
No, I said I don't think anyone would make an upset bid on this. I mean, we very rarely have an upset bid. In fact, hardly ever have an upset bid on when we're selling property outright. This is a very limited interest that we're selling. And, you know, if the statute allowed us to do this a different way, it would make more sense, but this is just the way that we have to sell an interest in real estate.
Okay, so if we gave it to the hospital, right?
Yes, sir.
Help me with this.
Yes, sir, you did, in May of 2006.
And we gave it to the hospital. The hospital turned around and sold it to Mr. Bradford.
Yes, sir, or to one of his companies, yes, sir.
Okay, to one of his companies. And so the hospital made a profit off of something that we had given to them.
It's my understanding that the purchase price was $350,000, and that money was paid to the hospital.
$350,000. Now, I'm getting ready to jump fast forward here to what you just said, what you were just talking about as far as the reversionary process of it. I'm not understanding that either.
Okay.
Because let me tell you what I'm not understanding. If that was the case, if it was sold for $350,000, now I don't know anything about real estate, but if it was sold for $350,000, and then he just want to pay the reversionary process of it at $500?
That's just an arbitrary value so that we can advertise this. And I mean, I don't know whether the reversionary interest has, I don't know what the market value of that would be, sir. It's just really an arbitrary figure just so that we can move forward with this.
Okay, so what would where would the upset bid come in? What would you look at as far as the upset bid?
We have to advertise this in the newspaper, and anybody could come forward and bid $550 for the county's reversionary interest, and then it would become a transaction between Mr. Bradford and whomever offered the upset bid.
Not the monies that was initially made of $300 and some thousand.
That's correct. This has got, the $350,000 was paid to the hospital in 2006.
So who would be losing?
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense that the county deeded the property to the hospital and 4 months later the hospital sold it. I agree with that, but that was something that was done 10 years ago, and there's nothing we can do about that now.
There's nothing at all?
No, sir, because we did deed the property. The county did deed the property to the hospital, and the hospital had the right to sell 20% of the, you gotta understand, when this was done, it was part of about 70 parcels. The big hospital building,
Right.
Howard Smith Rainey, there are parcels of property in that transaction scattered all over the city. And this was one of them. But the hospital was given the right by the county in that agreement to sell up to 20% of those assets and keep the money.
Thank you. I still don't understand. Something is not clicking here, but thank you.
I mean, I'll try to address it. But what the hospital did was valid under its relationship to the county. It did not breach any agreement with the county. The county gave the hospital the right to sell up to 20% of the property.
But what I'm not understanding is the reversionary agreement, but that was done 10 years ago. And
To protect the county's interest, when this property was deeded to the county put 6 conditions on it. And I won't go through all those, but basically, the hospital must maintain its licensure as a general community hospital, which it has done. The hospital must provide services to indigent persons, which we have, no evidence that they have not done that. There's certain legal documents that the hospital cannot change without the permission and consent of the Board of Commissioners. If the hospital does some of those things, then these 70 parcels of property would revert automatically back, the ownership revert back to the county. That's what the reversionary interest was and still is. The reason that Mr. Bradford is now asking for the county to extinguish it is because it is attached to that property, and it affects the marketability. He says he likely cannot sell this property with this attached to it, or this reversionary interest be retained by the county, and I believe that would be correct.
just out of curiosity, do you have any idea what the value of this property is? It's spread all around, you said, though.
All the properties
Yeah.
conveyed to the hospital, at that time, it was in excess of $80 million. I don't know what it would be today. That's not this lot, you understand?
Right.
We're talking about the hospital, the big
Right,
hospital,
right.
Smith Rainey, the medical, there's a lot of properties scattered around that were included in that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And let me just clarify, one of the conditions that the hospital must do is pay the annual payment, payment in lieu of taxes. That's also one of the conditions that was attached to this, and the hospital has done.
Pay one of the what payments?
A payment in lieu of taxes, it's not rent, it's not taxes. The hospital agreed to make a payment, an annual payment to the county for this transfer, and that's been ongoing too.
And how much is that payment?
It's a little over $3 million.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought $3 million
Just a little bit over $3 million.
that we receive annually.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All that was part of this complex transaction.
Before we have any other questions, my only understanding of this is that the attorney who was advising the Board of Commissioners at that time felt it was unnecessary to transfer this reversionary interest. Our present attorney who advises us believed that that should have been done. And this action is nothing more than to correct that so that Mr. Bradford can convey good title to his buyer. Everybody operated in good faith, and the county operated in good faith. It's just, in the opinion of its attorney, what we're talking about doing now wasn't necessary at the time. Rick says it was. That's where we are. Ben?
Well, I think the issue becomes all the entities that's involved. If I'm not, and I know, Rick, you're going back trying to piece this together. The entity is the county had it and would have had to put it up for an upset bid. But at some point, they transferred it to the hospital, which is a private entity. so they don't have to go through that process.
I don't think, I don't think
mean-
the same statute does not apply to a hospital
Right,
corporation. I
that's,
don't think.
so, in essence, that's how they got around the upset bid part. But the reversionary part was still there.
Yes, sir.
And I think I saw one email where the trustees, but that was at the hospital, because I saw Anita Melvin's name down there, where they actually went into and made a motion to be able to do that, but also had the revisionary clause, they had to come back to the board. But I never saw that part where it ever came back to the board.
It didn't
I guess
come
that's
back.
where, that's,
It never came back. That's the
and
last.
even that motion, it never came back, but even that motion set some conditions even further than the revisionary clause, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And so that whole process has been missed.
Well,
So where we stand in terms
I
of
think-
that not coming back, in terms of the motion that was made at the hospital, back to the Board of Commissioners?
I think to put it in context, you have to understand that these are two separate entities.
I understand.
All the agreements, whatever agreements were made back in 2005 were with a different entity than the entity that actually purchased the property.
No, I'm not talking about
Okay.
whether Bradford knows, but if you look at the minutes from the hospital, from their closed session that you highlighted, that sent it back to the board. I'm missing that piece, where it came back to the board, that the board ever took any action on anything.
The only time the Board of County Commissioners had any information on this was in August of 2005, when they voted to approve the sale of, when the county owned it and the county
Gave it to
approved
the
the sale of it. No, when the county approved the sale of it to one of Mr. Bradford's company, subject to upset bid process. Nothing else ever came back to the board. The board transferred it along with the other parcels in May of 2006, because at that time, it looked like the transaction was not going to happen. I can't, there's no explanation for how some of this played out. I just pieced together the best I could. It's clearly an issue for this owner of this property at this point, and it's clearly gonna take board action to resolve it.
But, and I guess, if I got one last question, Rich. And the revisionary interest is an interest,
Yes, sir.
and it may be worth more than
Oh,
$500.
yes, sir.
And,
I
I mean, that's just an arbitrary
That's an
amount.
arbitrary number, yes,
And
sir.
he put it because that's what it's gonna take to do the upset bid. And I understand that, the cost, he's basically wanting to hold the county, saying, I'll pay for that, so you don't have to pay for that.
Yes,
But there's always a value to that, whatever anybody's willing to pay for that,
Yes, sir. And I
which
have-
could be to Mr. Bradford's detriment, because it holds up his sale of the property. It does become much more valuable to somebody in the world, because if I got that, I hold up whatever he's finna sell and whatever it's worth to whoever does it. Okay.
Charles, another question?
Okay, yes, sir. Commissioner Keefe, I'll be short. Quick question.
Yes, sir.
What is your advisement to this?
It's purely a political decision in terms of making the decision to do this or not. I assure you that I believe this reversionary interest does affect this man's ability to sell this parcel. I mean, frankly, it's inexplicable to me why he would have bought a parcel of property like this even 10 years ago with this on there without getting it cleaned up then. He says that he was not made aware of it by the attorney searching his title. That's possible, but he got a quitclaim deed for $350,000 commercial property. There are a lot of things about this that just don't make sense, but this is stuff that lawsuits are made of. But this is just what it is. I mean, I don't think, I feel better about this knowing that the Board of Commissioners did declare this property surplus and agreed to sell it in 2005. I mean, back in 2005, this Board of Commissioners voted to sell this property. It just never happened. And now it's, even though the hospital went ahead and sold it later, this reversionary interest was left on there, and it's just got to be resolved.
Okay, one more question to you. And I understand what you're saying. I really do.
Yes, sir.
But help me to understand this. As advisor to the seven of us, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm really not. Would you advise us to vote in the affirmative of this?
I've advised the board that if you do this, to do it the right way through this statutory process, and that brings up all the questions that Mr. Adams is bringing. I mean, this exposes it to anybody in the world and in the county making a bid on it. But if you don't do that, you subject yourself to a situation where this process could happen again and again, and eventually you could just sort of erode the protection that you built in for the county for the transfer of this property to the hospital. To my knowledge, this is, well, I didn't know about this one. I'm not aware of any other parcels that have been sold by the hospital. In 2013, the county released its reversionary interest to the hospital for some property immediately behind the hospital for a hospital purpose related to some type of residential care place there. We could do that, just the same way we did to the county, but there have been no other instances of a private sale that we've been made aware of.
Chief Keefe?
I'm going to yield to Commissioner Adams first. I'd like to speak after him.
Well, the council's next.
Okay?
What happened to the $35,000 that was paid on September 16, 2005?
I don't know. We received a fax copy of a check from the hospital, and it was never received by the county. For that reason, I'm assuming that it was never cashed. We did not get, I have confirmed the hospital got the $350,000, not the county. And that check was not, even though it was made out to the county, all we got was a fax simile of that check several weeks after it was written.
Okay, I'm confused now. Lenny, next.
Commissioner Evans, and I know you didn't want to put the county manager on the spot, but I think that at the end of the day, the county and the hospital are getting what they bargained for. Whether it was a good bargain in 2005, that's a whole different issue. And I think that board made a decision back then that it was a good decision. So basically what they did was declare it surplus, and that was the benefit of the bargain. I don't think that we should, in terms of Mr. Bradford, whatever he's going to do with his property, I mean, it's his property. He paid $350,000 for it. Back in 2005, this board decided it was surplus, didn't need it, and sold it for that amount of money. So I think that part of the process is fair to both parts. I think if we do anything to hold Mr. Bradford up, that's not fair to him. That's just my look at it in terms of the benefit of what you bargained for. Now, the part of the revisionary part, I don't even think that gives us any problem. It's going to give Mr. Bradford, I think, some issue if somebody out in the community decides, I want to hold up that sale. But I do not think that it hurts us. I think that it's incumbent upon us to do what was bargained for. That board bargained for that, and I think Mr. Morefield will, if you look at all of this, Mr. Bradford came up, made a legitimate offer, $350,000, paid that amount of money. I don't know what happened to your 35, but paid the $350,000. It was accepted, and I think it's incumbent upon us. It's easy to be a quarterback looking back saying we didn't do something right, but I think that at this point, that in my even looking through all of this, that I think it for us, it's our benefit to go ahead and do the upset to culminate this whole sale.
And more or less honor what was done previously.
That's correct.
And that's my opinion.
That was done by a board that sat where I don't want to second guess what they did. They sat there, they made that decision.
Well, it should have never come back to us then.
Well, only because of this reversionary clause that didn't have anything to do with, I think, either board or Mr. Bradford. I think I'm an attorney, that's some attorney issue that just didn't see that clause, or it's not even that. I think what happened is that people made a determination, lawyers do it all the time, that we don't need to advertise this. The revisionary clause is gone because it did that. That's the decisions. I mean, that's what we get paid for. That's what we make every day. I think somebody made that decision a long time ago, whether it was Mr. Barrett or whoever. But I think that we need to fulfill that obligation in terms of the sale that we did. That's just me speaking now.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion. If I would have known Commissioner Adams was going to say exactly that, he just took everything I was going to say. Regardless if we think it was a good deal in 2006 or not, it was a deal that the county made. And it's not, it's not right for us to penalize. Mr. Bradford paid the asking price at that time, and that was the deal that was made. So, Mr. Moorfield, is that long paragraph the motion?
The short paragraph at the top is the motion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to, the county attorney recommends that the board consider the offer and request from Rapid Cities LLC, and if the board proposes to accept the offer, resolve that in the reversionary interest Cumberland County holds in the described real property is not needed for governmental purposes, direct that it be advertised and sold pursuant to the upsaid bid process of General Statute 160A-269, and set a date for the meeting at which the board may accept the offer. And the proposed advertisement is included.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Let me just add that the purpose of the reversionary interest, as I see it, is so that it protects the county. It gave away the property in good faith for purposes that we understand were for the hospital. But if the hospital goes to sale, the county can get the property back. That's basically what it was.
It works, obviously, that's why we're here. The reversionary interest works.
It worked
Exactly.
well, didn't it?
Exactly, and it should have been released at the time because the board's intent was to release its interest, and for whatever reason, that did not happen. Any other discussion?
We do need to set the date, if there's gonna be a special date set for that. They won't do
I'll
this
take
by
a
then.
second motion on the date, okay? All in favor of the first motion?
Voting in favor, Commissioners Keith, Edge, Adams, Chairman Faircloth, Commissioners Council, and Lancaster. Voting in opposition, Commissioner Evans.
Okay. All right, let's set a date for the next meeting, and you said the earliest that date could be would be the 27th.
Yes, sir.
Is that okay with y'all? We're just accommodating somebody in our community is what we're doing. We don't have to do that. We meet again in August. But it has to be after 10 days from the first day of advertising. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The earliest we can get it advertised will be about Thursday, so it'll be the
Probably
27th.
get it in Thursday, so.
Mr. Chairman, I will not be here on that date, but I can be on telephone if I need to be. You probably won't need me anyway.
Well, if we don't get a bid, it'll be pretty simple.
Well, once again, in good faith, I mean, if we can get together on the 27th, let's have
What day
this.
of the week is it? I don't even know.
Monday.
That's a Monday.
Yeah. Let's get together and do it, and
What time y'all want to get together on that Monday?
I like early.
5:30?
9 o'clock? 9 o'clock.
8, is that 8?
Yes, in the AM.
Seriously? 9 o'clock?
Yeah, because I can get my work on, keep my day going. Let me come back later.
All right, somebody make a motion for 9 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever.
Did you say 8 in the morning?
Say 9, but 8 works too.
Do we have a quorum that's going to be here on the 27th?
Or as I know, I'll be here. Kim will not be here.
We got a quorum.
Knock it out.
I can make it.
All right. I
All right.
move
Then-
that
okay.
we, I still want the $35,000, but that's okay.
Well, you ain't gonna get
Hospital
that.
got it.
I move
You
that
probably
we,
spent it.
You can cancel that one.
I move that we set the date of the meeting June 27th at 9 o'clock a.m.
Okay.
Does it need to be in this room or 564 upstairs?
We probably need to use room 564. This is normally used by child support.
They have cases, I believe.
Yes,
that
yes,
they-
ma'am.
Okay, room
all
4,
right.
5, 6.
In room 564 upstairs.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Unanimous.
Okay. Thank y'all. I apologize.
So we going now
This
upstairs.
came to me and I
want
brought it to you.
I bet you do.
You know what though?
Okay, at this time, we'll recess this meeting, we'll reconvene in room 564 for purposes of budget discussion.